Ed Meltwell's two passions in life were audio and astronomy. The astronomy bug bit him early while he was a boy in Huntsville, Alabama.
Bob and I lived a block apart in Huntsville. And one day he said, "Did you get the bulletin off the board?" And he showed it to me, and it said Astronomy Club forming. And so the two of us went over there, and there were three other guys. And this elder gentleman, he introduced himself in a guttural accent, and his name was Werner von Braun, and he was forming the club. We spent at least a year hanging out with him. We built a telescope. You know, it's who you meet in life that makes your life.
He began his involvement with electronics and audio as a ham radio operator.
So when I was 15, I built a little transmitter. The next thing you know, I won the first prize at the Birmingham Ham Club, the amateur club. That was back at the beginning of what I was interested in.
A member of Ed's ham radio club was the chief engineer for WAPI Radio.
Vic Bankowski, who was the assistant chief over radio of WAPI. He asked me if I'd like to come to work under him at WAPI. Within a week, I was on my way to Birmingham.
At WAPI, Ed mixed live audio programs, recorded commercials, and began working with music director Henry Kimbrell.
Henry was the music director of everything, and if there was any live music, he played the piano and arranged it and did all that stuff. Henry called over on our side and said, "Ed, come over. I'm sending one of the guys from over here." And so he worked the board, and I ran over and mixed a session on the air, live music on there. So every time from that point on, they just had a thing where they would call me over, and I'd come mix the music, you know, piece of cake. One day he says, "I've got a jingle to record." It was a Jack's jingle, and it ran for so many years, everybody in town still remembers it.
Jack's hamburgers for 15 cents are so good, good, good. You'll go back, back, back to Jack, Jack, Jack for more, more, more.
We did a bunch of jingles. At that point, it just started to roar, and everybody in town wanted us to do it, so we did it there in the studio, the West Studio. Beautiful little studio, worked great.
When Ed left WAPI at the end of 1960, he and his wife Fran decided to go into the studio business. His first real studio was in a garage in English Village.
When I left API, I decided I was going to build a studio. My little wife was working at Delta Airlines, thank goodness, and was making us a living, and I started looking for a place to have one. The first studio was in a little garage in English Village. Tom Little introduced me to it. All I need is a garage. Finally, in 61, the doors opened. In November of 61.
While Ed was building his studio, he managed to spend some of his weekends working on recording sessions in Nashville. For Ed, one particular session at the Decca Studios stands out. Johnny Horton's The Battle of New Orleans.
We took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. We fired our guns.
I was a gopher up at the Quonset Hut in Nashville. I was a gopher at lots of studios up there. I was picking up tips what to do. Went back when I was building my studio. I went up on weekends if I didn't have something. And all the musicians and engineers became my friends.
Didn't say a thing. We fired our guns and the British kept a-coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago.
The background group is the Jordanaires, and they're doing that sing-along. They're with Johnny. They recorded it many times, trying to get it right. And back then, they just kept recording a song from the front to the back. Heck, I had been splicing fronts and backs and sides and stuff together for years. The drums come in. Right after those voices where they faded out there, it starts. and I just spliced on the drum. And on the very first, that's the first splice, and I put the ending on too.
After a couple of years in the garage, Ed had the opportunity to move his business into a church at 1st Avenue North and 35th Street.
The church was like it just drew customers. It was beautiful sounding.
In addition to recording voiceovers and commercial production, the large sanctuary and stage made it easy to set up rock and roll bands for recording. Among the bands making records at the studio were Birmingham's own The Distortions, who had a regional hit with Behind My Wall.
Four of my best friends. That was one of the first things that really sold a lot of records in Birmingham.
Just a meager flask of wine and a clock that tells no time, some cigarettes, that's all my company. It is now the sundown time, but there are no ties to bind. I'm infallible and I shall never fall from behind my wall.
The Ramblers, also known as the Birmingham Ramblers, recorded their single 100 Miles Away with Ed. Duke Rumore placed it in the top 40 on WYDE. Another group that recorded at the church was the Candymen, a band that would later become famous as the Atlanta Rhythm Section. Dwayne and Greg Allman, later to form the Allman Brothers Band, recorded at the church with two different groups, the Allman Joys and Hourglass.
We recorded so many things out of there that some of which became hits that I never heard on there. I never knew I'd cut the hit.
Another local production that became part of the Birmingham soundtrack was a recording of the late Bob Kane, who called Ed one day with a question.
Bob Kane called me and said, "Edward, can you do a remote recording session?" I said, "Sure I can. What do you need?" He said, I want you to come down here Saturday. And I went down there. They had rewritten the lyrics to "Just a closer walk with thee, to just a bowl of butter beans." Turned out to be just hysterical.
Just a bowl of butter beans. Pass the cornbread if you please. Pass the cornbread if you please. I don't want no collard greens. I don't want no collard greens. All I want's a bowl of butter beans. All I want is a bowl of butter beans. Just a piece of country ham.
After a couple of years in the church, Ed moved back to English Village, where his advertising business continued to grow. In 1973, he made the move to 23rd Street South, where Boutwell Studios would remain for 25 years. It was there that he worked on a number of projects with Tommy Little, who by that time had moved to Atlanta. One of those projects was a television commercial for Southern Airways, a commercial that would make it to the Clio Hall of Fame.
This next commercial was only seen in one part of the country. However, people in the advertising business gave this commercial every award possible and consider it to be a classic.
Second cabin, please.
Southern Airways believes that no man should be subjected to the indignity of being labeled or treated like a second-class citizen. On Southern, there's only one class of service, and it isn't second.
The preceding spot was on NBC Television's program, Television's Greatest Commercials. We won 3 Clios for the music track.
Ed also contributed music to the movies, including Stay Hungry, based on the novel by Charles Gaines and filmed in Birmingham in 1976. an association which led to a friendship with fiddler Byron Berline.
Byron Berline was the music director of this movie called Stay Hungry that Arnold Schwarzenegger did. And they shot it all in Birmingham. A guy that knew me brought him over to the studio and he says, "Can you record bluegrass?" I said, yeah. I recorded a bunch. He said, "Can I hear some of it?" So I played for him. He says, "This is great. I need to record some tracks for the movie we're doing, and I'd like to do them here."
Ed later went on to record an album with guitarist Mason Williams, an album produced by Byron Berline.
Byron called me a few months later and said, "I'm going to bring a buddy of mine over. I'm going to record an album there of Mason Williams."
The project included several heavyweight session players, including drummer Hal Blaine.
Hal Blaine, the world's greatest drummer and funniest man. He was in the group out there, the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah.
He was the drummer of the Wrecking Crew.
Ed was a supporter of the Greater Birmingham Humane Society. In that capacity, he, along with John McGibney and some others, founded the Doodah Day Parade, a major fundraiser for the organization. Over the years, the talent roster at Boutwell Studios included a number of local musicians and engineers, including Eddie Hinton, Mabry McKinney, Tom Petrus, Courtney Hayden, Tony Wachter, Don Mosley, and Wayne Thompson, among others. When Ed passed away last month, his daughters Nancy and Leslie were at his bedside. A recent post on Facebook summed up the feelings of many who knew Ed. A friend recalled, "I never saw Ed that he wasn't smiling." Maybe that was his secret to making it to 85 with most of his faculties intact. His relentless cheerfulness and the kindness he radiated to anyone who would stand still long enough to listen to one of his stories. Hail and farewell to C. Edward Boutwell, our friend, our mentor. Until we meet again.